Everybody, welcome back. Today I'm going to be installing the new carbon fiber tank from Jeremy King at African Air Ordnance. This is a 4,500 pound tank, PSI rated, versus the 3625 PSI tank that comes with the carbon fiber upgrade, whether you purchase it that way or add it on like I did later on. I do have the Magnum hammer spring and hammer already installed in this rifle, and I'm going to show you guys how to install it, but I'm going to be removing mine because the cocking force with the Magnum hammer spring and hammer is so hard that I can't hardly get this bolt to close, to where I almost feel like I'll break this gun if I continue to keep it in here. But it takes a tremendous amount of force. Like, this is me pulling almost full strength. I'm gonna rip these screws out of here. And what's happening in this, there's a tube inside of here that these two go into. This is the stock hammer, spring, and then hammer. I'm gonna put the stock hammer back in with the Magnum spring, and then that'll allow me to get a little more room in there, because that Magnum hammer is a little longer and the Magnum spring's a little bit longer than the original. So I have a ton of spring tension without it even being cocked already right off the bat. So I'm going to eliminate some of that by replacing the stock hammer in there. You may have the same issue, I don't know. But we're going to do that, install this tank, and then probably in the next video we'll be doing some shooting, some feet per second numbers, which you can find on other people's channels per se. You want to watch that. But I'll be kind of giving you guys my idea. And I'll show you guys the TX2 valve over the MOAV or MOVA valve, whatever they call that valve, on this new upgrade. So this rifle is built in the USA, so it should be standard wrenches. You don't need metric. You should not need metric at all. I will try to get you sizes on every single thing you need to replace this hammer spring and hammer, but there are a couple of smaller ones that I can't identify. Unless I were to caliper them, which I probably won't. So you'll just have to find a pack that will work, I guess. But for the most part, if I know the size, I'll let you guys know. We're gonna start by removing this tank off the gun. There is a lock screw for the collar, which is what the tank threads into, is this collar right here. There's a spanner wrench that comes with the gun. To loosen that, I have broken mine, so I'm just gonna, I think if I were to turn this, it'll come loose. But anyways, you loosen that screw right there and thread this right out. That'll be our first step. So we're gonna do that right now. I got 3 30-second here. That's what it'll take. And pull it right out. We don't want to lose that one. Then I'm going to take my tank and just give it a slight turn. Sure enough, it breaks free. You want to keep your gun upside down when we're doing the hammer spring upgrade, because there are some components that can fall out. So me, I'm just going to work this tank back and forth while moving that locking collar with it. I guess I can spin the collar from here. Unthread that collar from the tank. And I'll show you guys these two tanks compared, because there is a slight difference. That right there is your difference. Let me see if I can get it out further. Looks like you are gaining about 3 inches probably. I got my son over there playing in the dirt. If you hear him. But yes, this is 3625 PSI and this is 4500 PSI. Both carbon fiber. This one here for the 2023, they did put on a digital valve, which is whatever. And it only reads bar. I don't have PSI. I imagine that would be the PSI reading, but it doesn't do anything. I would like just to have the standard gauge like this, because obviously it's one less thing to fail, but I don't have a 4500 PSI gauge to replace that one with. So This right here's our bump stop. That's nylon, whereas they have a rubber one on the TX2 valve. And then we got 5 air ports here, whereas on the MOAV valve, or whatever it's called, you got 3 very large ports for channeling that air through. So less restriction, I guess, on this valve. One thing I'm worried about using this valve is it's going to be dumping so much air per shot that I hope we don't go backwards, because I only plan on filling this tank to 4,000, which it is over that right now. I did fill it to 4,500, and it is bleeding slightly from somewhere, but I have not shot it to really seat the O-rings yet to see if they'll stop it from leaking. But my plan is to keep this tank at 4,000. That's more than enough for my deer hunting that I'm doing, and I'm shooting most of my deer at 50 to 100 yards, which I've done and shot a couple of deer with old aluminum tank, which was 3,000 psi, and have had pass-throughs even out to 73 yards. So 4,000 psi would be plenty. I almost thought about using this tank with the TX2 valve so I can get more shots. But they say not to dry fire the gun, and I don't know if I should dry fire it to get the air out of this tank, because I don't know how to really relieve the pressure out of this tank. I'm not going to go and pull back on that. Just dump it 100%, you know. Be allowed to be dangerous. So dry firing is everything I can think of. But that being said, we're going to slap the new tank on, and maybe down the road, you know, come wintertime, I got more time to play around. I need to do research and see if this TX2 valve would be rated for that pressure, the 4,000, before we even put it on here anyways. But this is a larger tank, so we should be able to get more shots per fill. So enough about that. We're going to install the tank last, actually. Looks like where they meet up to the gun, they appear to be the same length. I want to make sure I wasn't going to have any real interference. Yeah, they appear to be the same length, so I'm not going to have anything hitting this loading tray. And Jeremy does give instructions in the email, which I have not really read, so bear with me as I make mistakes. But we're going to change out the Magnum hammer spring, which you can see is in there, and the hammer, and then replace the OEM hammer and keep the Magnum hammer spring. But you got to remove them both to get that out. So we'll do that right now. So we want to start with the rifle upside down because there's some springs and stuff that might spring out. But gun's cocked open. It doesn't matter that I know of, because I did it with an uncocked last time. But we got 2 little screws on the safety. It's got an external slide plate on it. I got my magnetic screw tray right there, bolt tray. I'm gonna put all these parts there so I don't lose it. These are very small. This Allen wrench, I think, is the only wrench I don't know what size it is, so I can't help you there. Loosen up the trigger shoe as well. Can't pull it off yet. Set that aside. We're going to take off this front grip. This is an 1/8 inch screw. Take that out. Got an 1/8 inch right here. Loosen that up. Take that off. Then I got a 5/32. This will be down for the screw inside of the grip. This screw right here is what actually retains this screw. Pull that out. We got this. I pull this shoe off. This can stay. I'm gonna pull this out so I don't lose that. That's all it is a nut, basically. Then I've got 7/64 to loosen up the 2 screws on the charging handle right here where they meet that tube. I'm going to decock the rifle, so I'm going to pull on that charging handle until the safety can come forward. I'm gonna pull the trigger, just like that. It's a very small screw, so I got a little worried that I was going to rip them right out of that aluminum tube. There's that. Okay, now all we have left is that 1/8 inch button head cap screw right up here on the top of the plate. I'm gonna press down on the plate while we loosen this up. Pull that screw out, it's the longest screw there is. Come up gently with that top plate and then set it somewhere. Now we have a couple of springs here, and there's a bunch of little pieces of steel that all kind of work together as part of the internal safeties. So we want to be careful not to disrupt any of that. We're going to pull this one out, the first one, closest one to the end of the barrel. Then I'm going to take this and I'm going to press down right here on the rear. I don't know if you see that lift up slightly. That's all we need to do. That will allow this tube here, which is what holds the hammer spring and hammer in place, allow that tube to come out. And then the safety also needs to be forward, I think. If you do that, this whole tube will slide right out. If you can't get it to slide out, it's because something's wrong. Okay, so safety actually has to be back. Safety's got to be back, and this comes right out. Don't try to fight it. I actually tried to fight it for quite a while. But this is your shot tube, is what I would almost consider it, but it's where your hammer spring's at. This is your little sight window that you adjust the power wheel at. And what it is this spring smashes into this. This gets compressed, which I can't even do with my thumb because of how tightly against it is. I know you see a gap here, but this piece here is longer on the back side than it is right here. Anyways, when you cock it, this gets ran back and held under spring tension, comes forward and smacks this piece, which then hits this little lip here on the valve, dumping a amount of air. And basically, as the bullet moves out of the bore, there's no more back pressure up against this valve to keep it open, and that's the pressure behind it closes it. So that's how you get the same amount of air, so to speak. Even though the rifle's not regulated, you get the amount of air you need without over pressurizing it, I guess. So we'll keep the gun just like that. We're going to get into here. Now I can't unthread this by hand, as you'll see in some of Jeremy King's videos. He can just reach his finger in there and unthread it, but because I have so much tension on this is a plastic retainer. I have to stick something in there to take the pressure off the spring that's pushing it this way and reverse it to get it out. And I'm hoping with the new hammer, with the OEM hammer back in place, it'll be back to normal and you should be able to adjust that pretty easily. This thing's so tight that I actually can't slide it really at all. It doesn't want to move. I'm about ready to destroy that plastic, so I don't think that's how it should be. I'll probably end up ruining this tube. The screws will probably unthread from here on the charging handle. So either we need to cut something off the spring, or I'm going to try right now the OEM hammer. I think with that big old spring in there, that'll be more than enough to open up that valve. I sure hope so. So we'll find out together. So I just had to find something that would fit inside this tube that was grippy enough. All it is a Stanley pick. I jam it up that end of the tube. I push into the tube so I can take the weight off the spring a little bit, off the threads, and I start unthreading. You don't have to do this when you first take the gun apart. It's just this spring, this new spring and hammer is so big that there's so much tension on it. So there it is. This is the plastic, and I don't like how it's plastic. It should not be plastic. Those threads can get destroyed, especially when you're illegally modifying it. So I guess that's probably maybe why it's like that, because you shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But I'll take out this spring here. Big old spring. I'll show you guys a comparison. So I do want to mention a few problems I had with this hammer getting it installed. Is there was a couple of burrs on the outside edge, and it would not allow me to remove it out of the gun. So I had to take this guy out. See how that moves freely now because there's nothing against it? This hammer gets stuck inside the tube, so I had to deburr that quite a bit. And right now I'm getting caught up on these threaded holes here. It won't let it come back out. So I might just undo it from here and slide it out the front, which would actually be the rear. But yeah, because I'm going to start scoring up the tube here, and then I don't want the original hammer to drag. All right, so let me bring the camera down. Here is the Magnum hammer, and I don't have a scale to tell you guys what the weight differences are, but I can show you in size. Here's the OEM one that comes with the Texan for height. By reinstalling that, I'm going to gain, that 3/8 of an inch, and then here's the OEM spring. So, I mean, when you add, 1.5 inches of material plus another 3/8 inch, you're maxing everything out. We're going to put this back into the tube, and then this back into the tube. I'm going to add, never mind, I already got enough oil on there. I was just going to lightly lube it up with some Hops 9. It's not actually Hops 9, it's their Elite gun oil. I was just going to do that. But it's got enough residue on there. Put that in first, that's most important. Put this in. And then we'll stick this threaded piece in. And then we're going to thread it in. So this did work out better. I can actually turn this by hand now. I could not do that originally with the original upgraded hammer. Now I am getting to a spot where I can just start to see it through the window, and it's starting to get too hard to do it with just a finger. You'll about tear your skin off. So I am going to use my pick again. And they said you want to rotate it just till those holes start to show. So right there, it's starting to show. I'm going to go till I get a full window of those holes right there. Let me focus that. Okay, so we got that done. I already kind of lubed this the first time I did this, which was last week sometime. I was going to videotape it for you guys, but I ran into a lot of problems by trying to figure out why it was so hard to cock, because I originally thought that I had broke the rifle, seriously, because it was so tight. I thought I did something wrong. So now when we're reinstalling it, we got the 3 holes here for the charging handle. The sight window is in the back where it needs to go. We just reinstall it. It's super duper easy. Get it all the way in there. Rotate it till you get to where you need to be. So now everything's gonna be reversed. I'm just gonna fast forward this. There's no real tricks or secrets. And then we're going to dry fire it. We may have to adjust the valve from what I read to get this new 45 PSI valve to open. I might need to adjust the spring tension, I'm sorry, to hit this valve correctly. So I'm going to, they said to dry fire it because this is not Air Force Texan parts. I'm going to dry fire it probably and see if I'm getting any air coming out of this. And if I'm getting valve lock, which is where the gun sounds like whisper quiet, then I need to continue to add more spring tension to this, which will make this harder to cock. So hopefully everything will be easy. I really don't want it to be hard because I feel like I'm going to break the gun keeping it the original way with the heavier hammer. So we'll dry fit that and then kind of go from there and dry fire it, make sure everything's good. But for now, I'm going to fast forward this on the reinstallation. And if I think of something you guys should know before reinstalling it, I'll get back on. All right, so got the valve installed. I did mess around with the charging handle back here a little bit. I did it to where half the holes are showing through that power wheel adjustment. But to me, I can actually cock that. It's definitely stiff, but it's definitely not impossible. So now all I got left to do is take this little protective boot they put on that valve filler and take the one that comes with the standard Texan, put that on there, which it does not fit very well. That might come off. That part fits obviously, but this right here does not. So we're gonna go fire it off. I do have one pellet, but then we'll dry fire it to see. This is filled to 300 bar. So, or 310 bar, whatever that is, 4,500 PSI right now, or close to. So, it'll be a test. We're gonna see if it'll have valve lock. All right, so I just shot it with a pellet, and then I dry fired it as well. I probably should have dry fired it first just to see, because that pellet can obviously add some back pressure on that valve. Per se, it slightly opened that valve. You just never know what pressure we had with velocities for that pellet on the first shot. So I feel like if I had dry fired it, I might have gotten a more truer result based on if the hammer alone was enough to open the valve up, or if having the hammer lightly hit the valve and then having that back pressure of the pellet in there allows that valve to get pushed in a little bit further as well. I don't know, but the first shot did drop it down to 257 bar. And now with this gauge is at, with a dry fire, to 255. So we lost, 2 bar, or whatever we want to call that, with a dry fire. So I think with the pellet, it did dump about 50 bar per shot, or for that first shot. So we know the valve did open and dump a tremendous amount of air in there, but I expected more of a recoil, more of a noise report than what I got. So I'm not 100% sure, but I do have the holes on the power wheel set to where they said they should be. We will be chroning it and shooting pellets for accuracy and trying to figure out what the best performance I can get out of this valve. I do plan on filling it to 4,000 PSI. I was gonna say, this bottle being longer, I now have to move my scope back because I had to lean way in to see through my scope when I was trying to hit that piece of steel out there when I was loading that 300 grain pellet in there. So just FYI, you can't slap this on, go hunting. Obviously your velocity is changing, and then your eye relief, so your length of pull, everything has to be figured. So keep that in mind. I imagine this is going to dump a ton of air. We may only be able to get 2 shots per fill that are accurate. I don't know. I hope not, but we will learn that together. So thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned because I have more coming possibly this week.